Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Thought Leaders. I'm your host, Chris Sheng, and today we have Amelia Taylor, who is the founder of the Revenue Table. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Chris. I'm so excited. Right before we started, I said to Chris, I wanted to do anything that Larry Long Jr. was doing. So shout out to my buddy Larry because he is a gem of a human. But no, it's great too. It's great to be here.
Awesome. Tell us a little bit about the Revenue Table. What is that? What kind of companies do you work with?
Yeah, so I have a heavy background in enterprise sales, and that's really where I got my foot off the ground and getting to know some of these SaaS B2B companies. And being internally with them, I would jump into marketing meetings. I would jump into the ops meetings and they'd be like, well, hey, Amelia, welcome. Because I was trying to cross train myself because I was thinking, something is off here, or maybe we could do this. And I was looking at the lay of the land completely on how these companies were going to market, thinking, well, this company's doing this company's doing that. So over the course of time, I decided, okay, what do I want to do when I grow up? Who do I want to be when I grow up, if you will? And I said, okay, let me go take a bet, challenge myself, see who it is that makes the most sense to go work with by process of elimination, really. Knowing the B2B SaaS space, that was, initially where I jumped into
Mhm.
with saying, hey, I'm creating the revenue table. And the whole premise behind that is really the people that you sit with at the table that you choose to put your chair at, that's where the revenue is being passed, whether it's through partnerships or it's, different people that you are co-marketing different events with, or it's your customer base, right? So I've learned that revenue. And so with that said, the past couple clients that I've had, they've not been straight B2B SaaS, which is interesting. One being more in like the educational space, and they have no social presence whatsoever, but it's alternative education. And then the other one being more financial education, so fintech, which is not my realm. I'm still like counting on my fingers over here. So learning that revenue, it's like, okay, to every company, if you don't have revenue, you don't have a company. So regardless of who it is that I'm working with, it's being a peer to the buyer
Mhm.
and helping lead with that approach of you got to be someone likable enough for them to actually want to work with you, especially the way the buyers are today. No matter what industry or focus it is, people buy from people that they like and people who are trustworthy and those that they feel as though, hey, you actually know what you're talking about at the same time. Like you're an expert in what you do, or you're going to build this bridge of trust between problem that I have to solution that you have, and you're going to go with me over this bridge. And so that's the big factor that I bring to the table, the revenue table, if we want to be cliche here. And it's been enjoyable. It's been interesting by doing and learning and taking a chance on myself.
Very cool. And so look, you mentioned that, you went through these different iterations before figuring out like what you wanted to be as when you grew up kind of situation, but perhaps it's better worded like what you wanted to invest into on your own and putting your own resources into. But before that, you spent a lot of time in enterprise sales. Can you share with us a little bit about what that chapter looked like? How did you get into sales? I feel like a lot of people who end up in that space kind of get in there, haphazardly or just out of blind luck. And yeah, just wondering what that journey was for you. Is it something that you were already passionate in, understood what the lay of the land was, or was it something that you just fell into?
I knew nothing. I knew nothing about anything. I didn't know what an SDR was for 2 months when I joined a company for being an outsourced SDR at this organization. I was like, you know what? It's too far. I'm too far gone. I can't go and ask what this title even means right now because I'm past that. But I I jumped in, and this is, I can share this kind of on a personal note too. Um, I'm a single mommy of two, and I had to make ends meet, and it's a bridge or a roof over me and my kids' heads. And I was like, hell if I water, like I got to figure this shit out. So I I called some friends and I was like, where do you make money these days? And they're like, you get into tech sales. And I was like, don't understand technology. Like, what do you mean? They're like, go into software sales. You start here, you go here. This is kind of like the advancement of how you can have this, but you got to start somewhere. And so I joined a company called Inside Out, and I was selling T-Mobile Enterprise for business. And so what's so funny is that I still have relationships with the people that I was just cold calling. I mean,
Mm,
I was just calling them, but I learned, okay, not everybody's in the same place. And so I started really thinking outside the lines, but I don't color inside the lines very well. So I colored inside the lines and I learned, okay, let me gray out these, this box a bit of maybe this person's living in a different platform because I can't get a hold of them via phone whatsoever. And so then I took a few courses and classes on LinkedIn. Okay, how in the world, what is this thing? Um, and try to just start building that in the most genuine way possible because we can, we all see through the BS of, what's all the dick and, using all the buzzwords of what it is through LinkedIn, but the sharing and growing and what I was doing while I was doing it. But a big thing when I was a rep, I would ask for feedback from the people who would say no. And 9 out of 10 times, what's everyone's favorite topic? Themselves.
yeah.
So these VPs of sales at these big companies, I'm like, can I ask you a question real quick? If they said no to me and they would say, sure. I would say, if I was on your team, what would you tell me that I could have done better to secure a really solid meeting with you? And they'd say, oh, I love that you asked me that, and then they would share their spiel of whatever. And I would say, can I ask you one more question? Yes. And I would say, can I try again? And so then I would do what they would say in my, in my kind of tonality and all that. And it would kind of be this, it would be more fun. I would have more fun with it too, because then I would challenge myself and it made them know, like, hey, I hear you. I'm listening to what you're saying. So from there, I jumped into being at a data company. And so I learned the ins and outs of that wild world. But I had a lot of opportunity there through being able to build a lot of trust with these industry leaders within SaaS from having this. It was a sales secret summit that happened quarterly. I didn't know when it was going to be, was told, hey, can you just go reach out to the top people and tell them, hey, we want you to come speak at the Sales Secret Summit. We just need 3 to 5 minutes of a video sharing your sales secret. And I'm like, well, when's the summit? Who do you want? Like, and I was like, oh, just go get the top people. The summit, it'll be in a couple months. And I'm thinking, okay, cool. Let me just go do what I do best and just go communicate with people and be like, hey, I don't know when this exactly is going to be, but I think you're great. I love your content. I love what you've done and having actual examples, and physical things that say, hey, this, whatever it is, Lars Nelson, I love this. You're the OG when it comes to playbooks for sales development. Who's a buddy of mine to this day through my outreach there. And it was neat to see how those relationships just developed. So I started really diving into, okay, relationships equal growth, which equal revenue, which equal in some fashion of it being introductions or it being referrals or recommendations. And so I never really, I mean, all this said, and going through kind of my career, I was selling RevOps services and I was with Rosalind Santalena, who I think is one of like the best people in the world when it comes to RevOps. She helped me a ton with learning, hey, you don't have to know all of these little details. These people know more than you do when it comes to RevOps that you're talking to, but have your core questions that you're going to go to because those show the curiosity driver behind what it is that you're trying to solve and help them with. And so in doing so, then it was, I kept advancing and learning and very, very curious, not advancing in the sense of like I'm going up and to the right. It was more of this horizontal advancement, which I think is very misconstrued or it's not honed in on enough that people realize like the importance of it because up and to the right. That's great. Good for you. If you've got this goal of like, I'm going to be a VP of sales, I'm going to be a CEO. Awesome. I love that for everyone who wants to do that. But if you're like me and your path has been a little bit like here, and you're good at this, but you're trying to figure out exactly what it is, like your funnel focus. What am I the best at? When I walk out of a room, what is it that people would say? Oh, she's the best at this. That's where I started really thinking, I need to back up before I move forward and slow down before, and I can't go up and to the right because that's, you want to play in the majors, like you can't, you only get to the certain point in the minors to where you realize, oh, I'm going to be totally fooling people if I go try to play up here because they know what they're doing. If I keep trying to play at the speed that I'm playing at. So slowed down just to speed up. And then that's when I took a look at everything I was doing and said, okay, let me really dive into like who it is that I am. What am I the best at? What do I have a passion for? And because that matters crazy, like a crazy amount, where your passion lies. And then drawing a big V on a sheet of paper like a kindergartner. And so I just wrote all these things down and eliminated something each line to where I just had one thing at the end. And it was, okay, what I do best is help companies drive revenue through relationships and partnerships. And I thought, okay, I feel good about this. And then it's like, well, what do you do with that? So it's kind of the Simon Sinek whole thing. It's like, okay, you've got your what, but it's like then you got to plug in the why and the how and all of these things. And um, so mapping that out is more challenging than I thought, but it's been more rewarding than anything because I'm learning more about what you don't do than what you should do, which is equally as important, like I said. So that is my long spiel of how I jumped into sales. I was saying, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to go do the very best that I can. And that first, STR gig that I had, I put a cap on everyone's commission month one during my ramp time. And they were like, Amelia, we have to keep the lights on or pay you. And I was like, well, why not both? And they were like, well, we got to pay everyone else too. And I was like, so, everybody, there was a love hate for me over there for sure with some of the other reps. Definitely a rewarding experience to prove to myself that I could do things that I didn't know exactly what I was doing.
Yeah. I'll say this in your spiel, I feel like there is this level of self-awareness or the humility to discover that self-awareness about your strengths and your weaknesses, which I think that is probably the Achilles heel for most salespeople
Mhm.
is they they don't have that humility, one, or two, like they don't have that self-awareness just intrinsically. Um, in a lot of these conversations that I've had, I would say you have great individual contributors and then you have great leaders. And this could be in sales or marketing or HR or whatever leadership kind of position. And there's a clear distinction in skill sets from being a strong individual contributor in whatever realm that might be versus what it takes to actually be a leader. And I think it seems at least a lot of those leadership traits around like awareness, empathy, compassion, communication, be able to build relationships are things that seems to be a little bit more inherent in you by nature. Um, what do you think about that? And also, like, how do you think when you've encountered other leaders in the executive roles or what have you that you deal with relationally in terms of being the strengths and perhaps some of the weaknesses and what have you seen in terms of like the ones that actually are really successful at what they do versus the ones where they're the bottleneck and they may not actually be aware of it?
Right. Right. Well, I no, that's a great question. And I appreciate your kind words. I do feel as though the leadership aspect that has to come with the communication, that being like top of my, and then also the curiosity of what is it that the top reps are doing, who I'm leading, those people, who is it, or that I'm delegating someone else to lead. But the curiosity of knowing and asking those questions and still being involved, even at a C-suite level, having those actual not just we want revenue yesterday kind of things. Those are the kind of leaders that it's like red flag, red flag, red flag. What's going on internally that I don't know about? But um, everyone wants revenue yesterday, right? But that's not going to keep your customers long term. Like what is it? You want the ACV, awesome, but also you want the customers not to churn. So the relationship building is not going to happen overnight. So those leaders that you see who see the importance of growing within different areas, saying, okay, maybe communities are where a lot of our ICP is living and talking and breathing, and they're having engagements with other peers saying, what is it that you guys are using? And it might be the solution that you have, and joining those conversations and letting somebody go and say you have a SWAT team, right? Which I think is super like neat when I hear companies do this. They've got their top reps and they're like, okay, put a few people on like this SWAT team and they're going to test and try something new. And we're going to do this. We're going to see if this makes sense and build a methodology behind the madness of what it is and a process, because people aren't people aren't manageable, but processes are. So knowing that, it's if without a process, you're going rogue your strategy completely. Um, so when you see leaders who know when to pivot because they see the market doing what it's doing, say it's going, it's completely shifting, or and I mean the buyers, the journey is no longer a journey; it's a full-on experience. It's like, okay, we're going on this grand trip, right? They want to go, and the weather is great their whole time they were traveling, and all the way through they get there, it's great, service is great, so on and so forth. And they, call buyers, super high end these days. I don't know, but they want what they want when they want it, but they also want to know I can trust the person who is taking care of me. And that's something that I feel like is some get it and some don't,
Yeah.
and it's an experience now. So a company that I was with, Reggie AI, which they are wonderful. Matt Millen is one of the founders, and him and I had about 3 calls because my first week there, it was, hey, here's the 16-page script for you to learn. And I thought, what? Going in as a seller. And I said, respectfully, no, this is not really how I've ever done this. And I've never sold. And so we became this yin yang a little bit. We understood each other because I said, okay, well, let me go out and be where the people are, if you will. Let me go talk to people and be that, top of the funnel bridge of trust. Let me get CEO to CEO conversations happening. Let's eliminate the rest of this whole process to make it simplified. And after 3 calls and me crying at the very end of it, saying, let me off my leash, and he would laugh about this too. He said, okay, well, what can you do? And so I said, okay. So I find it was the global CRO of Babel within Pavilion. And she said something, they were trying to figure out their content strategy with AI. And so I was like, huh, okay, here we go. Game on. So got those two in touch with each other, and they had a great conversation. And he was like, oh, I guess you can go build relationships outside of you need to know this script to a T. And do I believe that there's the sales execution needs to be absolutely, honed in on 100%, but also know when to grab the SE or someone who is also going to bring that another layer of that intelligence that's going to be where maybe you as a rep, you don't know what those things are. So also for a C-suite leader, for them to guide their people in that sense too. Hey, it's okay to bring, pull this person in. Hey, if it's a CEO, pull me in if it makes sense. If this is a huge organization, it looks better on our behalf. So using that EQ is so vital in a leadership position too, not just the IQ.
Yeah, I 1000% agree. I think like a lot of this also stems from, I think like this bull run that we saw within software and SaaS for almost a greater part of a decade, right? From
Mhm.
like 2010-ish to maybe right when you entered into like the sales realm. And I'm sure you've gone through the cycles of seeing that evolve. And it feels like you didn't have to be a great salesperson. Those scripts worked. It was like velocity and volume and people are just buying things for the sake of buying things, I feel like is almost, somewhat of a pyramid scheme to a certain degree too, because you had just a bunch of VCs funneling in money
Mhm.
into an ecosystem that was just selling to one another, and you ended up seeing this pullback, that I think was, for me, it was like triggered by the SVB situation. And then
Mhm.
all of a sudden, with interest rates also going up, you saw that the cost of capital all of a sudden became very expensive. And so companies don't have all this money to spend anymore. And so they're pulling back and they're trying to make decisions around what actually is important. But to that point is also, it's not like they're not buying anything anymore, but the way that they buy, I think, has changed. And the way that their BS radar is at,
Mhm.
sky high levels now, because they need to be conscientious around every dollar spent. Uh, how, how much of that did you see tangibly as part of like your evolution personally, versus this being like an organic assessment of yourself and your skill set? Because I feel like it's an it maybe it was like just like, hey, I'm great at building relationships, but I feel like it also coincidentally fell in line with like where sales enablement is going, which is
Right,
like about building relationships. So
right.
maybe it's just the timing of it all works out well for you, but I think it's like also maybe evaluating the landscape and then seeing that that's the direction that it was going. But you tell me.
I would say a bit of both, that it was a little bit by happenstance, circumstance, but also evaluating the lay of the land to a degree, but also being self-aware enough to know where my strengths were at. So I think those two just kind of by, coincidentally, they just kind of merge, which is great. But also that's I can go build a relationship. That doesn't mean I'm selling to this individual. I still have to go sell. So it's the curiosity driver of being able to actually dive in, and then also understanding who it is that you're even talking to. Like, talk to people like people, but also have the knowledge of what it is that, like, maybe they don't need what you have.
Yeah.
And it's okay to suggest, hey, I don't know if this is the best thing for you, because those are the people that will have the utmost respect for you. You might not get your dollars for that, right? For that deal, but they will remember you as being a really good human who isn't trying to take their money, who's saying, this might not be best, but here's a few people you should chat with because I trust them totally. They probably can give you some really good guidance on what could be best. Reach out if you need any help. And if you know anybody who you think that I can help, let's work like that, like teammates. And it's more times than not, people are so willing to do so because it's a okay, it's about who you know these days. It's like that who
Yeah.
you know, the who knows who economy. So seeing that and knowing that I didn't know what I didn't know going into sales to begin with, it was like, well, let me lean on who it is that I'm getting to know. And then being able to pass things forward too by saying, hey, I don't understand what I'm doing when it comes to trying to have, 8 stakeholders in a room and I'm trying to navigate and they're in different parts of the world, whatever it is, going to someone that I trust who coaches that and teaches, sales methodology, and being vulnerable enough to say, can you help me out? People are willing to do so, especially if you're in the same community as they're, or if you see they've got that little green circle right there that says they are online. Like, you're reaching them when they're online. And also you're doing it in a fashion where you're saying, hey, I don't know, and I'm humble enough to admit that. And I'm trying to learn from someone who's the best of the best. Can you help me? People are willing to help more than people realize. But it is so true. Ego's the enemy. And a lot of people don't want to go admit, or they just simply don't know. And I think that's a frontline management issue right there. And that's a whole nother spiel of why were people promoted, right? So seeing that internally too is interesting because you're looking at things thinking, okay, well, why are these managers managing individuals, and these reps are the ones who are thinking we have to be reactive with all these AI tools, whatever it may be. And they
Mhm.
don't know what they don't know because maybe this manager was just promoted because they threw up a bunch of numbers. No one looked at close one revenue that was passed down. They're just looking at pipeline revenue, which is like, that forecast is like complete BS. And so, we've all been salespeople and we know this, right? That you can throw up a few numbers and you're like, no, this one's going to close. I feel great about it. And you're like, shit, I haven't talked to them in like, I don't know, 6 months, but we're going to just change this. And so, that goes back to the leadership too, of say, getting in the trenches with your people and really assessing, okay, like the behaviors of who's these top reps, what is it that they're doing? And then being able to like lay out what it is that they're doing. And then also like the core fundamental things that they're doing, the making them the best, and having those people be able to help other reps do what they're doing in their own fashion. So I kind of went off topic here, but frontline management kind of just irks me. So I have to bring that one up. Um, but I would say it's a crossroad to answer your question of my skill set and then also what has shifted in the market. And I agree with you of when this whole transition really started to happen with the buyers of people not really, depends on the company and the leadership if they help their people adapt and adopt new ways to reach their buyers and not just reach them, but talk to them and communicate with them about you can't just use that same script and call it like this is our playbook. Like here's like if I get one more message, it's like I saw you like Chris Walker's post, da, da, da. I mean, I'll lose my mind. Like every so did a lot of other people. Like that doesn't intrigue me. I don't care. That is not a promising outreach method at all. That is not a good tactic. Cut that out, y'all. But if you said to me, hey, I went to Ole Miss too, or um, and I'm a mom of two as well. It's really cool to see what you're doing. And don't give a CTA. Just it's great to meet you. Excited to follow your success, whatever it may be. I'm more inclined to go and say, hey, thanks so much. Or they put a post of mine or something in a message they sent me. And if you know me, LinkedIn is where you should reach out to me the most, or through a Slack community that I'm a part of. Um, but if it's something that's going to be where, hey, this really spoke to me, thank you so much for sharing this. I'm going to respond to you without question. But don't go throw something at me thinking that I'm some buyer of yours when I'm absolutely not. When you're saying I'm running revenue at XYZ company, and it's like, if you did a little bit of research instead of relying solely on AI, that would have told you no. So uh, it is, the buyer, like I said, it is so much more of an experience than a journey now. And adapting and adopting to that is like more vital than ever right now for companies to win and stay afloat.
Yeah, I agree. That AI front too, I 1000% see that. I just feel like, yeah, I've said this before, quite a few times, but I feel like the AI tools is almost like giving a loaded gun to like a toddler to a certain degree, where it's like you're giving them to this very powerful tool, which in the right, I think, context could be very valuable, but it's so accessible to a bunch of salespeople that are not salespeople. And I think it's just making the traditional channels even much more noisier. And from the prospect's perspective, it's like making it even more inclined to just be dismissive across the entire channel, let alone, and I could be then like selling a cure for cancer across any of these channels, but it's like, it's not even about that product or the solution anymore. It's just literally how do you cut through all that stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Which I agree. I think, the frustrating part also for me working with certain founders or certain like sales leaders is around that their mindset of trying to have that level of predictability around pipeline, which doesn't necessarily, I get why. And I think that's kind of been the relationship with like VC and board and then founders. And then, that trickles down to the VP of sales. And that's kind of like what they think of when they think of the go-to-market or sales motions. Like, what is the levers we need to pull for every dollar we yield XYZ out of it, right? And I think that we need to see this shift happen where it still can be predictable, but we need to define the different levers a little bit differently, and it needs to come across as genuine. And ideally, it is just very genuine, but like, how do you even just the perception of genuine and sincerity, goes 10 times further than just like what you said, which is like, hey, I saw you, liked XYZ person's post,
Right.
where you got like 10 other people saying the exact same thing. And the moment you see it multiple times, you just like, it's just like rubs you the wrong way.
Mhm.
Um,
Oh, totally. Rubs you the wrong way is the perfect I mean, or I'll get, if I don't respond to it, but it shows I read it, it's like, Amelia, question mark, question mark. I'm thinking that cannot be your second step here. Like, you
yeah,
did not put that
yeah,
in your tool that you're using, whatever, to be able for your outreach. Like, absolutely cut that noise out. Like, that is like just that is awful. That is awful. And it's because people are so reactive. Like, they're
oh
not
yeah,
being active. So there's no understanding of, okay, what tool's best for us.
yeah,
And who's the person who's doing that internally and evaluating too, when it is like, okay, if you don't keep up with AI and technology today, you're going to fall behind. So it's like, we got to go fast, 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 go, go,
yeah,
go, reach everyone. So there's got to be this
balance.
balance, but it's really hard to find. And that's why I think we're seeing a lot of these companies, we're seeing these mergers, right? And we're seeing some of these kind of empires, if you will, being built with some of these really strong voices and people who have been there, done that, because it's this, okay, let's build this up because we're going to be the top dogs in this space. We're going to be the top in this space. We're going to be the top in this space. And I see that being exactly what will happen is like all of these top companies, they're going to take over because they're going to teach the people the right way how to do things. And then they're going to grab the right people who get,
Hmm.
so even at an SDR level, it's like, okay, well, what are you the best at?
Hmm.
What is you different from the XYZ other reps that are there, however many it is? What makes you stand out? Is it the numbers that you have that actually are closed one, that your numbers and you can say, hey, here's what I did last month, here's what I did last quarter, here's what I've done over, and
Yeah,
they can say it because they know it because they care. Or here's the companies that I was able to help close. Here's the channels that I use that are unorthodox, but I didn't make a bunch of cold calls and I sent 0 emails, but I did a bunch of huddles through Slack and like I closed a bunch of revenue. So what is it that reps are doing that make them stand out? Because you'll go into one of these empires being built if you do things that make you different from everyone else.
yeah. And that's the cycle, right? I mean, it's like you need to find the things that are going to work until they don't work anymore, and you find new things, right? That, yeah, I think that's what the superpower is of like somebody that's a great marketer and salesperson, is like they are continuously iterating. Um, and I think like if you really look at the life cycles of some of these like large enterprise companies, that's what they are aware of. Like they
Mhm.
know that certain channels work for a couple of years and then they die down and you got to switch it up and then switch it up again. Um, but I agree. I mean, I think as you're saying, talking about some of those uh, annoying kind of outreaches. I mean, I've gotten like passive aggressive ones that are just so horrible where it's like, you haven't been looking at the thread forever and you haven't even opened it. And then all of a sudden they're like, I guess it's just, it comes
Guess you're
across
not
as like almost,
interested. Right. And you're like, what? Like, don't come at me like that. Like, what in the world? Or like it is passive aggressive. I just think that is I will never want to do anything with you. And it's your brand and the company brand that whoever you're working for, like you just completely ruined for me.
yeah,
So that's like a big thing for salespeople. Like, remember what you're doing. Like, it's a reflection of you as you being a brand and also the company that you're working for, because people talk and
yeah,
buyers talk, and there's all kinds of groups where they're talking. And it could be in WhatsApp groups. It could be anywhere. You don't know. I mean, I was talking to some people over at Chili Piper recently, and they were saying, okay, there's a lot of these micro communities we're a part of, whether it's in the VP of marketing, he's in a few of those, and then Alina's in a few where she's the founder who
yeah,
she's, yeah, I'm in this WhatsApp one, I'm in this, and she's like, how do I consolidate these? Because it's like there's too many here, too many here. 15 is a good number because they get what they're doing. It's like, okay, I get what it is that you here, let's also share resources, and we're all trying to grow and be better. And
yeah,
so here's top people, let's put them all in the same little room, if you will. And that's, to me, best practice for leadership overall is going and not being afraid of being in that, in these dark spaces, if you will, and actually going and figuring out where people are talking. And then also having your reps be more inclined to go and figure out where people, I mean, it could be on Reddit threads, who knows?
Yeah,
Go find where people are talking and go join the conversation by helping. If you're helping, you're selling, plain and simple.
yeah,
But when you come at people the way that you're saying, if you are passive aggressive, I assure you, you are failing as a salesperson through and through.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what that is. I don't know why people do it that way, or if it's a lack of EQ or whatever it might be, or if it's like, this idea of like instant gratification or instant satisfaction, and like they are, but they're going about it in a completely wrong way to try to
I
get that, right? So it's like, I don't know where that comes from, but
don't
um,
either.
but yeah. I think a lot of the things that you said were great. And on that note, I know we're over time, so I just want to, we'll stop there, but this was a great conversation and there's a lot of like great nuggets in here. I 1000% agree with the direction of like relationship building to drive sales. But it has to come from an altruistic place. I feel like it has to come from, and this is something that's been thematic in a lot of the sales leaders that we've interviewed, is just that you have to be somebody that comes in that is an altruistic problem solver for the customer. And
Mhm.
that may or may not be directly related to your solution. But you need to find and build that trusted relationship. So when the time comes where the pain matches the solution you have, that's when you go in. But
Right.
up until that point, you have to be somebody that they can lean on for other issues or make other introductions, you know what I mean? Like, but become
So
that person. So
yeah,
1000.
it's a trusted advisor, if you will, to someone who's not, they're not paying you to do so, but you don't know, they could at some point. But when you're trusted, there's a lot that can happen. So build that trust, take the time to do so, and don't do so in the sense of I'm going to wait to get whatever it is that I want, but sure, that's the goal to win business with this person. Sure, but also it's to tap into their networks. It's like also grow like who it is that because it's a who economy through and through, like we were saying. So same
Yeah,
page with so many things. And no, this is an awesome conversation for sure.
very cool. Thank you again for the time.
Yes, thank you, Chris.